In 2 parts, I'll be reading out this review for Season 19 that Thomas Cookson published on the 12th of the 3rd, 2012. The weekend's over. I find myself meticulously going over the 80s to clarify what went wrong and how things could have been different. J&T made good choices in Season 18 to reshape the show for a new decade, particularly casting Peter Davison at the star power and audience draw that could benefit the show enormously, ensuring the show could survive Tom Baker's departure. They completely blew it. 10 million people attracted by Davis's casting and Earthshock's buzz tuned in to watch Time Flight. The ratings declined from there, and Davison himself started thinking of leaving. J&T put Season 20's lower ratings down to poor promotion and rescheduling onto difficult weekdays, but still Davison was the audience draw, and even he wasn't sticking with the show. Had the show ended on Logopolis, its cliffhanger ending could leave a massive demand for a novel's range continuation, State of Decay likely being their heaviest influence, Castrovalva, The Visitation, Black Orchid were all novelised by their original authors, and probably still be written in the TV show's absence, making Christopher Bidmead's idea of the Fifth Doctor being an old man trapped in a young man's body for the definitive portrayal for the books. Season 19's famous 5-companion dynamic would be much better and suited to Poirot's. More importantly, a respected sci-fi novelist Christopher Priest was lined up to write a Season 19 story. Maybe he'd have written a full-length novel, possibly The Human Nature of the 80s. What if J&T only produced Season 18? J&T had provided a writing team shake-up, and a new producer could have inherited Peter Davison and J&T's new blood writers without shunning Terrence Dicks and Robert Holmes. With Eric Saywood on board, we could have still had Revelation of the Daleks and discovered Barbara Clegg. Perhaps a more easygoing producer wouldn't have brought out Eric Saywood's passive-aggressive streak that tainted the show and its hero, and Christopher Priest's story would be produced, and this new sci-fi credibility for the show would maybe bring more sci-fi novelists on board. Instead, Christopher Priest's script endured many rewrites, mainly to accommodate Adric's absence. Christopher wanted a pay rise, J&T got volatile and abusive, completely souring a golden opportunity for the show that previous producers could only have dreamed of, leaving me wondering how the J&T apologists ever pulled off the scapegoat producer myth, given the queue of talented people the prima donna producer drove off the show, including PJ Hammond, making a creative drought inevitable. Sure, those apologists could blame the budget and say J&T couldn't afford the demands of high-profile writers, so they had to go, but good writers are the show's bloodline, and arbitrarily changing the companion dynamic was needlessly complicating to those trying to write for the show. My justification for what happened is that the BBC, in giving the producer's job to an underqualified man, showing poor faith in him, guaranteed that he'd become a producer with something to prove, hence why the show became more neurotic, forced, and pretentious. Maybe J&T's coping mechanism and drive was about keeping himself going by seeking constant adulation and shunning anyone who might tell him what he was doing was wrong. Who might tell him he was doing it wrong, or maybe he was just an unpleasant narcissist determined to hog the glory and remove any other big names associated with his show. Whatever J&T's reasons or insecurities, he should have never been given the power he had to abuse his privilege and treat others unpleasantly. Season 18, J&T was the only uncompromising tyrant who could deal with an uncontrollable prima donna leading man, but J&T should have left then. Many say J&T should have produced light entertainment or variety shows, even though he produced the most humorless and depressing Doctor Who stories. Maybe he could have found his niche, but he should ever have been in charge of a show with Doctor Who's name and fanatical following that he could take for granted. Season 19 finds the show caught between 3 script editors. Christopher Bidmead had left by now because he wanted a pay rise for his hard work on amateurish scripts, but he commissioned many of Season 19's stories, and he wrote the opener Castrovalva. Anthony Root became a temporary fill-in for the portions of the season Eric Saywood didn't edit. According to Eric Saywood, J&T fired Root because he was too discerning and kept rejecting unworkable scripts. This would explain some of the dreck Eric Saywood passed because he didn't want to get the boot too. Either J&T wanted stories ready quickly without fuss, even after he himself blacklisted the show's past writers who could write Doctor Who in their sleep, or he was wielding authority for its own sake. Season 19 scripts were a blend of the carefully chosen and the outright plastered together. After the solidity of Season 18 and the grubby realist feel of Warriors Gate and Logopolis, much of Season 19's crude artifice and soap opera is jarring. The stories had clever ideas and even winning whimsy, but badly constructed plots. Castrovalva's plot doesn't start until episode 3. Any plot in Forward to Doomsday is nebulous at best, although it's refreshingly playful and entertaining. Black Orchid works by being a condensed moment in the life story. Kinder is unpleasantly clunky in its narrative construction, and Time Flight is the most incoherent, unfinished story since the invasion of time. Tellingly, Eric Saywood edited Kinder and Time Flight. Kinder failed by not getting all its elements to dovetail while substituting focus and drive with random contrivance. The Doctor happens to forget Tegan and leave her sleeping. Hindu happens to go mad at the same time. The Mara is awakening. Compared with Horror of Fang Rock, where the Rutan sabotage of the lighthouse causes Lord Palmerdale's ship to hit the rocks, All genesis of the Daleks, where Davros madness and the madness of war are all-encompassing. Both civilizations are developing at the same rate, including their own secret weapons, the Fowls rocket and Davros Daleks. Then Davros science helps the Fowls destroy his own race just to protect his Dalek project, so everything comes from Davros' ambition. That's what tried and tested Doctor Who writers who JNT didn't want were good at. Sure, Kinda has some refreshing and groundbreaking cliche breakers. There are hardly any deaths, the unhinged commander isn't killed off and is even restored to sanity and benevolence, but somehow the story doesn't blossom and just feels barren. It doesn't have the natural organic feel of past Doctor Who. So see.